At my wife's family barbecue, her sister joked, "If your wife cheats on you, you're gonna cry like a baby." Everyone laughed except me. "He can't even perform in bed anyway," said my wife with a little smile. I just raised my hot dog and said, "Message received." That night I left, cut contact and disappeared. A year later I'm Jake. For a long time I believed marriage was like cement. If you mixed it the right way and gave it time to harden, nothing could crack it. I'm 28 years old. I've been married to Emma for 7 years and genuinely believed we were bulletproof. We had already survived so much together. We slept on air mattresses because we couldn't afford a real bed. We ate instant noodles for weeks when money was tight. We had arguments that lasted until dawn. And that time when I completely forgot our anniversary because I was working double shifts at the warehouse. She forgave me that night, hugged me at 2 in the morning and whispered, "We're a team, Jake, never forget that." Those words became my foundation. Emma was amazing, sharp-tongued, passionate, the type who lit up a room just by walking in. She had an opinion about everything and wasn't afraid to share them. I, on the other hand, had always been the quiet type, stable, predictable. She used to call me her rock and said I kept her grounded when her head was in the clouds. For years, I wore that description like a badge of honor, not realizing it also meant I was easy to overlook. But here's what nobody tells you about marriage. Sometimes the person you love most starts treating you like background noise. It doesn't happen suddenly with a dramatic betrayal or an explosive fight. It happens like water seeping into the cracks of a foundation, freezing and expanding until everything starts to crumble. First it was her gaze getting lost in the middle of conversations, then the sighs she didn't even try to hide when I asked about her day. Small kindnesses I always did. Packing her lunch, fixing the dripping kitchen faucet, bringing in the groceries while she scrolled through her phone feed went unnoticed. I convinced myself she was just stressed, that marriages have rough patches and that this emotional winter would soon pass. But the winter stretched on much longer than it should have. I remember how she used to touch my shoulder when she passed me in the hallway. A small gesture, but it meant the world. One day it simply stopped. On movie nights, when I reached out to hold her hand, she pulled back as if I had interrupted something sacred. We started sleeping on opposite sides of our king-size bed, separated by an invisible wall of unspoken resentment. I tried everything. I invited her to dinners, suggested weekend trips, even simple walks around the neighborhood just to talk. There was always a ready excuse. Too tired from work, too many tasks to handle, maybe next weekend, but that next weekend never came. The inside jokes we shared disappeared, the knowing glances in crowds were gone. She smiled more at her phone screen than at me. And the worst part wasn't the fights, it was when they stopped existing. People think shouting and arguments mean a relationship is in crisis, but it's the silence that really kills. We became ghosts haunting the house we had built together. The same place where we once danced barefoot in the kitchen at midnight with all the windows open. Then came the mocking smiles. Subtle at first, just eye rolls when I said something she found silly. I would comment on something and she would press her lips together, look away as if I were a bothersome relative at a family gathering. That hurt more than any direct insult. What she didn't say spoke too loudly. I felt the judgment hanging in the air like smoke, making it clear that my presence had become a burden she still didn't know how to get rid of. One night, after another day walking on eggshells, I finally asked the question I had been dreading. I kept my voice calm, nothing confrontational. "Emma, are you happy with us?" She didn't answer immediately, just looked at me with those tired eyes and said, "Why do you ask questions when you already know the answer?" That sentence hit me like a punch. I shook my head, went to the garage and stayed there, staring at the wall for over an hour, not knowing how to go back inside. There were hundreds of moments like that, each one small, seemingly insignificant to any outside observer. But to me they were paper cuts that slowly drained me. I started walking with hunched shoulders, speaking more quietly, laughing less. I wasn't living anymore, just surviving. I had become the guy who paid the mortgage, took out the trash on Tuesday mornings. I was no longer a partner or lover, just a replaceable part, keeping the household routine going. And I didn't know how to leave because leaving seemed like admitting defeat. How could I break the promises I made at that altar 7 years ago, for better or for worse, right? But nobody explains what you should do when worse isn't betrayal or abuse, but rather a slow apathy and constant contempt. The gradual decay of everything you believed was permanent. Then Emma's sister Victoria came to live with us after her messy divorce, and everything got 1,000 times worse. Victoria was everything Emma had once been, but in an amplified version, loud, dramatic, completely self-centered. She had no money for a deposit on a new place, no furniture, no deadline to leave. More importantly, she had a talent for turning every conversation into a stage for her personal drama. I watched Emma's personality change whenever Victoria was around. More laughter, animated conversations, inside jokes that purposely excluded me. In the morning I would make coffee for Emma and me, but somehow Victoria always got hers first with whipped cream and cinnamon on top. Mine arrived lukewarm, a small sign that I had fallen another step down the priority ladder. Victoria took over my office for her creative projects and yoga sessions. Her dirty clothes covered the floor of our bathroom. Her music echoed through the walls until midnight. Her friends showed up unannounced for impromptu wine tastings in our living room. I felt like a stranger in my own home, tiptoeing through someone else's life, while my space disappeared piece by piece. One afternoon I decided to surprise Emma with food from her favorite Thai restaurant. I spent all day planning this, imagining her face lighting up, maybe even getting a genuine smile for the first time in weeks. But when I arrived, I found Victoria teaching Emma how to decorate cupcakes, both of them with flowers in their hair, laughing at a romantic comedy I had never heard of. They stopped when I walked in, greeted me with a polite wave and soon went back to their moment. I ate my pad thai alone at the kitchen counter, listening to the conversation flow as if I wasn't even there. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked from room to room looking for some trace of the home Emma and I had built, but the house reflected what had already happened. I had become an extra in my own life, watching from the sidelines while my marriage dissolved before my eyes. Everything came to a head at Emma's family barbecue 3 months later. Her relatives were never my biggest fans, but they tolerated me when our marriage was strong. Now I felt their indifference like a physical weight. I grabbed a beer from the cooler and tried to blend in, but the feeling of isolation followed me with every step. Victoria, already drunk on wine at 2 in the afternoon, saw me standing near the grill and shouted, "Hey Jake, don't be so nervous. I promise nobody's gonna bite you." The whole table burst into laughter. I forced a smile and tried to play it off, making conversation. "Everything smells great, Mr. Patterson," I said to Emma's father, who was tending the grill with his usual serious expression. Victoria patted the bench next to her. "Sit here, Jake. Let's have a real conversation." The way she said real made my stomach turn. But I sat down trying to appear confident. She leaned in close, her breath smelling of wine, and whispered in a tone loud enough for everyone to hear. "So, Jake, just hypothetically, if Emma cheated on you, would you cry?" The question dropped on the group like a grenade. Laughter exploded from all sides. Emma's cousins, her uncles, aunts, family friends I had known for years. I stood there holding my beer, my face burning, trying to process what had just happened. Someone shouted from across the yard. "She probably already did." Another voice added, "Yeah, and what about that trainer at her gym, huh?" The laughter got even louder, echoing through the yard like thunder. I looked at Emma, hoping for some sign that she would interrupt this, defend me, do anything to end the humiliation. She was sitting in a garden chair, glass of white wine in hand, and for a moment, I saw a little corner smile appear on her lips. It wasn't embarrassment for me, nor outrage at her sister's cruelty. It was amusement, as if this was exactly the kind of entertainment she had been waiting for. Then Emma spoke up, her voice clear, cutting through the yard. "Well, it's not like he's breaking any records in bed anyway." The laughter reached its peak, people literally doubling over, wiping tears from laughing so hard. I felt something cold and sharp pierce through my chest, replacing the heat of embarrassment with something much worse. I stood up slowly, placed my beer on the picnic table and looked around. All these people I had considered family for 7 years were having fun at my expense, treating me like their personal punching bag. Emma's father laughed behind the grill. Her mother was trying to hide her laughter with her hand over her mouth. Victoria looked absolutely delighted with herself. "Message received," I muttered, but somehow everyone heard. The laughter died instantly. I made eye contact with each of them, letting the weight of those 2 words settle over the group. Victoria's smile froze on her face. Emma's trace of laughter completely disappeared. For about 10 seconds the only sound was the meat sizzling on the grill. I walked toward the side gate, each step deliberate and calm. Emma's mother shouted after me, "Jake, honey, where are you going?" I stopped with my hand on the latch and looked back. "Thank you for the hospitality, Mrs. Patterson. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon." Then I opened the gate and kept walking, leaving behind the nervous giggles and the awkward silence that replaced their cruel fun. I walked 6 blocks to where I had parked my car, my mind completely clear for the first time in months. They had shown me exactly what I meant to them, and I had finally understood the message with clarity. I wasn't family, I wasn't even a friend. I was their entertainment, the convenient punching bag whenever they needed to mock someone. That night, while Emma was still at her parents' house, probably reliving every hilarious moment of my public humiliation, I made a decision that had been building for months. I wouldn't stick around for the second act. I woke up at 4:30 in the morning with crystalline purpose running through my veins. I moved through the house like a ghost, filling 2 large bags with everything I really needed. Clothes, laptop, important documents, the emergency money I had been saving without telling Emma. I left a simple note on the kitchen counter. I hoped the joke was worth it. Below, I placed the divorce papers I had already prepared weeks before, when I finally accepted that our marriage was dead. At 5:15 I was driving out of the garage for the last time. I drove east toward the mountains, following back roads I had mapped out during sleepless nights. The destination, a cabin I had rented online with a fake name and prepaid cards. It belonged to a man named Frank who advertised guaranteed privacy with no questions asked. It seemed like fate. The cabin was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by pine trees and absolute silence. No neighbors, no cell towers, no Wi-Fi, just me and 40 acres of forest. For the first time in years, I could breathe without feeling someone's judgment weighing on my chest. I set up my laptop on a wooden table near the window and started taking freelance programming jobs. My clients didn't care where I worked from as long as the code was delivered on time. The days fell into a peaceful rhythm. Work until noon. Simple lunch, long walks through the woods. I chopped firewood. I learned to identify bird songs, read books from Frank's collection. At night I cooked basic meals on the camp stove and ate by lamplight, listening to owls and coyotes instead of cruel laughter and whispered insults. For 3 months I lived off the grid, no social media, no calls, no contact with my previous life. I let my beard grow, lost weight from the trails, gained calluses on my hands from splitting so much wood. But above all, I remembered who I was before I became Emma's doormat and Victoria's joke. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I drove to town and accessed my old email at the public library. 67 unread messages, almost all from Emma. The first ones were filled with anger. Running away like a coward won't solve anything. You can't just disappear when things get tough. This is so typical of you, Jake. But as the weeks passed, the tone changed. Desperation started to show. Please just tell me you're okay. I found the papers. We need to talk about this. Then came the manipulation attempts. Victoria feels terrible about what happened. It was just a joke that went too far. You're being too sensitive about this. The message that really broke my heart came almost at the end. I've been thinking about us, about what we used to have. Maybe we can fix things. Too late. She had 7 years to fix things, but chose to stand by her sister while she destroyed what little respect I had left. I found out, through mutual friends, that my disappearance had caused a big stir in town. Victoria had to move out when Emma couldn't afford the mortgage alone. Turns out I was taking care of much more of the finances than anyone imagined. Emma's father's business went into crisis when he realized I had been managing their accounts for the last 3 years. The whole family was struggling to reorganize systems I had created and maintained without any recognition. Emma started sending increasingly desperate messages, begging me to answer her calls, to help her sort out tax documents, to explain where I had stored important papers. She sold the car to pay the mortgage. She moved to a cramped apartment, watched her social circle shrink as people chose sides. Victoria, in turn, became persona non grata among friends. Turns out people don't like being associated with someone who destroys marriages for fun. 6 months after my disappearance, Emma somehow tracked down the cabin's address and showed up unannounced. I found her on the porch in the middle of a storm, soaked to the bone, holding a folder with the signed divorce papers. Her hair was shorter. She had lost weight, and in her eyes there was something I hadn't seen in years. Genuine remorse. Jake, she said, her voice barely audible over the sound of the rain. I needed to find you to say I'm sorry, to tell you in person that I take full responsibility for destroying the best thing in my life. She held out the folder with trembling hands. I signed everything. I'm not here to beg you to come back. I'm here because you deserve more than I gave you, and I needed you to hear me say that. I invited her in, made coffee, let her talk. She admitted that she had let herself be carried away by Victoria's toxic influence, that she started seeing me as boring and predictable, instead of stable and reliable. The barbecue incident, according to her, was rock bottom. Seeing me leave with such silent dignity while she remained sitting there laughing made her realize the kind of person she had become. I spent 7 years next to someone who would move mountains for me, she said, with tears streaming down her face. And I threw it all away because I thought I was too good for ordinary love. I thought I deserved excitement and drama instead of loyalty and partnership. I listened without interrupting and then calmly said what I had learned in those months alone. Emma, apologizing is important, but it doesn't undo the damage. You didn't just hurt me that day. You showed me for months, maybe years, how little I meant to you. The barbecue was just the grand finale. She nodded, understanding she wouldn't get the forgiveness she hoped for. We talked for 2 hours about what went wrong, what we learned, how we changed. When the rain stopped, she stood up to leave. I know you'll probably never forgive me, she said at the door. But I hope one day you find someone who values the incredible man you are. You deserved much more than I gave you. After she left, I stood on the porch watching the sun break through the clouds. I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete peace with my choices. I wasn't angry anymore. There was no more bitterness or resentment. I was simply free. A year later, I'm still living in the mountains, still working remotely, still chopping my own firewood. I started dating a park ranger named Lisa, who finds my quiet strength attractive instead of hindering. We take long hikes together, prepare simple meals, have conversations where I don't need to compete for attention or approval. Sometimes I think about that barbecue and the moment when everything became crystal clear to me. Part of me is even grateful to Victoria for being so cruel so publicly. That's what gave me the clarity I needed to save myself. Emma's family, unintentionally, did me the biggest favor of my life by showing me that I deserved more than being their punching bag. The financial devastation in town was even worse than I had heard. Through a mutual friend, I learned that Emma had to declare bankruptcy less than 8 months after my departure. Turns out I wasn't just managing our household finances, but also her father's small construction business and her mother's online boutique. I set up the accounting systems, prepared taxes, handled suppliers, negotiated insurance policies. All of this without charging a cent. Family helping family, I thought. When I disappeared, that entire financial ecosystem collapsed like a house of cards. Emma's father had to hire an expensive accountant who discovered years of messy records and missed deductions that cost thousands in fines. The mother's boutique closed completely, since she didn't know how to process online orders or manage inventory. The construction business lost 3 important contracts because Mr. Patterson couldn't present the detailed timelines and cost analyses I produced behind the scenes. Victoria in turn had her own reckoning. After being kicked out of Emma's house, she spent months couch surfing at friends' places. Her social media presence, previously full of carefully edited party photos and sarcastic comments, turned into increasingly desperate posts about fake friends and family betrayals. The same people who used to feed her drama got tired of her eternal victimhood. She ended up moving back to her elderly parents' house, a 42-year-old woman sleeping in her childhood bedroom again. But the most devastating consequence was what happened to Emma's relationship with the extended family. The barbecue exposed something ugly in their dynamic, the willingness to unite against a stranger just for fun. After I left, other family members started examining their own behavior more critically. Emma's cousin Michael, who had been one of the loudest voices ridiculing me that day, later told acquaintances that he felt sick just thinking about it. He liked me, considered me a good guy, but got carried away by the herd mentality. This reflection created cracks in the family unity they had always been proud of. Arguments began at subsequent gatherings about what had really happened, whose fault it was, whether or not they owed me an apology. Emma found herself in the position of defending me to the same people who had laughed at her cruel joke, which put her in an impossible psychological dilemma. She couldn't admit their behavior had been wrong without acknowledging her own guilt, but she also couldn't defend them without accepting that she had married a family of bullies. The guilt manifested in ways I only found out about much later. Emma developed insomnia, lost 15 pounds, started going to therapy. The psychologist helped her understand that she had been emotionally abusing me through neglect and contempt. The therapist apparently told her that watching someone you claim to love be humiliated without intervening is a form of psychological cruelty. Emma had never considered herself cruel, careless, maybe selfish at times, but not deliberately harmful. When we talked at the cabin, she said something I'll never forget. I used to think I was the victim in our marriage because I felt bored and ignored, but now I see I was the predator. I eroded your spirit and convinced myself it was your fault for being too sensitive, too needy, too simple. I turned you into my emotional punching bag and then blamed you for not fighting back hard enough. She had also discovered things I had never told her. After I left, she went through old emails and files and found evidence of how many times I had silently supported her, never asking for recognition. The time I paid off a portion of her student loan, but made up that the bank had made an error, or the money I had been saving every month to surprise her on our 10th anniversary, or the recommendation letters I wrote pretending to be her boss, because I knew she wouldn't accept help if she knew it came from me. I thought you were just there, she admitted, like wallpaper or a chair. Always present, always steady. Something I didn't need to think about. I never realized how much you actually did to keep our life standing or how much you gave up just to see me happy. Instead of being grateful, I started resenting you because you made everything seem easy. This conversation brought up another truth. Emma had been living with depression for years, but refused to admit it or seek help. The irritability, the coldness, the cruel words weren't just character flaws, they were symptoms. And the way she dealt with it was by dumping her pain on the safest person she had, me, the man who loved her unconditionally and who would take the blows without leaving. I know this doesn't justify what I did, she said. But I want you to understand that I was drowning. Instead of asking for help, I tried to drag you down with me. I didn't plan it, but that doesn't make it less destructive. You deserved someone who would lift you up, not someone who used you to carry all their pain. After she left that day, I spent weeks trying to make sense of everything she had said. Part of me felt validated. Finally, someone was admitting that what I lived through was real, but another part felt sadness for both of us. We were stuck in a cycle. Her untreated struggles weighed on the relationship, and my habit of avoiding conflict let the damage drag on indefinitely. I never knew if Emma really had an affair with her trainer, and I realized it didn't matter. The betrayal was already clear. She allowed the family to ridicule me, even joined them, and cared more about entertaining her sister than protecting my dignity. That showed me exactly where I stood in her life. Today, when people ask me about the divorce, I answer simply. We grew apart, wanted different things, and separated as friends. There's no need to expose embarrassing details or seek revenge. The best revenge is living well. And I'm finally doing that. Emma's burden is knowing she destroyed something lasting for something shallow, and that's hers to carry. Lisa, my girlfriend, the park ranger, knows the whole story. She listened without judging, asked smart questions, helped me work through the anger and pain I still held. And then she said something that opened my eyes. You weren't just married to Emma, you were married to her whole toxic family. Leaving her meant leaving all of them too. And she was right. I wasn't just Jake the husband. I was Jake the family accountant. Jake the punching bag. Jake the workhorse on whom everyone could dump their frustrations. My entire sense of identity had been swallowed up by their dysfunction. No wonder I felt lost for so long before finding the courage to leave. Oh, and I kept the cabin, by the way. I bought it from Frank when he retired and moved to Arizona. Now it's my permanent home, a safe space where nobody can ridicule me or treat me like a joke. Here the only opinion that matters is mine, and the only approval I need comes from the face I see in the mirror every morning. The place has become a refuge for me and Lisa. We host her colleagues for camping trips. We share dinners with friends who value kind conversations instead of cruel jokes. I learned to trust my instincts again, to notice warning signs early on, and to walk away from people who don't bring peace into my life. Sometimes I think back to that barbecue and the moment when everything became clear. Strangely, I'm grateful that Victoria was so cruel in front of everyone. It was the push I needed to save myself from years of slow and silent misery. In a way, Emma's family gave me the greatest gift. They showed me I was worth more than being their target. Looking back, I see how I myself allowed that behavior, never setting boundaries, never confronting, never demanding the same respect I offered. I confused being helpful with being valued. I thought their tolerance meant acceptance, when in reality it was just convenience. And that's my story. A simple family barbecue ended up becoming the spark for the best decision I ever made. Sometimes, the worst day of your life leads directly to the first day of your real life. You just need to have the courage to open the gate and keep walking until you find the place where you truly belong. Reddit comment. Funny how a barbecue that should have been about meat on the grill ended up just roasting a man's dignity, but in the end it was the main dish that set me free. Emma lost her husband, the house, her reputation, and even her free accountant. Victoria went back to her pink childhood bedroom, surrounded by faded boy band posters from the 90s. And me, well, I got the cabin, the peace, the lumberjack beard, and a girlfriend who values a real man more than an audience of fake giggles. If that's not a happy ending, honestly, I don't know what is.